Hello there everyone, welcome back. It's time to do things a little bit different this time, as we're gonna have ourselves a bit of an Eldar mirror match in a ranked mode, best of 3 no less. And I will be perfectly honest, my fleet is not exactly well built to fight Eldar, considering I'm relying on so many pulsars with my auroras and eclipses, as well as a bunch of torpedoes, which are going to be very hard pressed to actually deal with an Eldar fleet. So this is going to be a bit of a learning experience for me there. The one thing I do have going well for me is that I have 3 Shadow Kurnos patterns available to me to both deal with his bombers as well as being all star cannons, which is really good at negating dealing with the hollow field, whereas the pulsars and torpedoes are going to have a lot less impact, mainly due to the mobility for the torpedoes. He can just straight up dodge them super easily, and the pulsars are mitigated quite heavily by the hollow field. So all I really got going for me is the star cannons, pretty much. But that doesn't mean my Void Stalker's a weak link in this matchup. It's just going to be a lot less potent as he decides to field up an assassination mission. And if I were to be perfectly honest, also, well, I thought I was the defender of an assassination so he can reveal me for this engagement. But no, instead he decided to be the defender on this assassination mission. So that was kind of the reason why I picked the Void Stalker for this, to give me the extra health I need to kind of take the shots as I try and engage him there. And of course, the shadows are going to be my main source of damage, I want to argue, for fighting his Eldar fleet head on. I just don't have the convenience of frigates to help complement and provide support fire here. But I do have the same hand favor, which does open up some possibilities here. It opens up possibilities, but it really does come down to if he has beacons to kind of negate that, though. It does come down to that, because the last time I fought Calimar in the Championship Series, his fleet was all about energy bombs, shield disruption, stasis bombs, and all that. He was all about detonating bombs basically on there, but that's not quite as loadout this time around, which is going to be a little bit different. But I guess if I were to assume this matchup by that comment he just made, I'm going to assume he was thinking he was fighting Imperial Navy for some reason. In which case, I probably would have gone with my 2 Dauntlesses and a bunch of swords to try and swarm him. If not destroy the Void Stalker somehow, I could have at the very least done a lot of damage to his eclipses that he has escort fleet. But the same hand favor is underway. His fleet is completely jammed, so he cannot do any damage as I make my attack run. And it remains to be seen, though, how effective this strategy is going to be. It remains to be seen, but with the assassination, the fact he does have auger disruptors on his fleet, I am able to hit his ships without any issues, and he tries to reveal my ships, because keep in mind, even with his ships getting jammed, he still only has like 1,000 sensor range. And with that said, I get so damn close to that thing, it does reveal me, which is going to be complicate things quite heavily as he unloads his hollow fields. But what is it? His pulsars rather. But what happens here is, because I was revealed, all those bombers just hit that shadow immediately. It wasn't the pulsars that killed that ship. It was actually this bombers. All 8 bomber waves just jumped right on top of it when I had no defensive fighters, or at least very limited defensive fighters to shoot him down, because they were busy dealing with his fighters, quite frankly. And I gotta say, that was an incredibly short match, wasn't it? It was an incredibly short match, and if I actually didn't get that shadow revealed, I could have possibly been able to destroy some of his shadows there, or his eclipses, before going after the Void Stalker, because that really hurt me quite heavily there. That, and the fact is I decided to launch bomber waves on him when he has superior fighter numbers. So the one thing I'm going to have to learn in these mirror matches, especially since almost all the Eldar players I'm going to be facing against have all fighter bays, is that I'm probably going to need to forget about using the bombers until the very late end point of the matches there, where he has very little ships, he has very little point defense because his ships are wounded. I should seriously focus more on replenishing my fighters and having them available, because with how quickly that shadow died, that kind of emphasizes my point a little bit, doesn't it? Because that wasn't the pulsars that did the damage. It was more the bombers, because I was right in the middle of all three of them, and my did it hurt. But with his hull field down, it does take down his Void Stalker relatively quickly. But I am in a bit of a predicament on what kind of matchup or mission type I should try and do here. I do decide to go with the Planetary Assault again there, going with the Shadows and the Arcanites to kind of provide that Star Cannon type of wall, a fire, constantly be hitting him, constantly be doing damage, because the Arcanites are actually pretty good at that there. They're really good at helping to counteract the hollow field and doing damage to him there. Whereas if I went all cruisers and that, I kind of do have a slight liability. Well, just slightly, with not having enough star cannons and not really the number of ships that kind of surround and flank him ideally. Especially if he has the Maelstrom, which we do know he has because he actually used it earlier there in the first round with one of his ships. I haven't really checked though, to be honest, if he went all three ships having Maelstrom or if he actually decided to put it in his Solarises now, which he's going to be feeling Solarises in this matchup. He's going to be feeling Solarises, he's going to be feeling lots and lots of fighters, which kind of re-emphasizes the point again I said on I should forfeit having bombers actually do damage in this matchup unless I plan on overwhelming them with bombers. I could have actually done in the last match because I had the Void Stalker there with two Kurnos patterns, matching them in bomber potential, but if I'm relying on Star Cannons to win today, I should play more defensively with them. Play more defensively, especially since all my fighters were basically lost trying to deal with his fighters. We basically negate each other, so if I had fighters still available in some form, well, it's really hard to say honestly, because I want to try and get aggressive, at least ultimately my strategy, get close to him, make it really awkward for him to turn around and try and fight me, especially when he's on the run. Then I'm probably going to lose my defensive fighters anyway, so there's a lot I need to learn about this matchup in all honesty. And what probably really sucks is I'm probably not going to get any real Eldar matches for a good long while. So anything I learned from fighting out against Calimar is probably going to be forgotten or out of practice pretty much by the time I get another Eldar matchup, because hell, my experience fighting Eldar has been very limited. I almost never fight Eldar, it seems like. It feels like that anyway. I don't know if that's actually true. But we go on in there. He does have beacons this time around, probably on his Solarises, because those were the only ships that he's including here. Well, actually, he has Shadows this time around, so he could actually be fielding them on his Shadows this time. But I haven't really been seeing False Maneuver quite yet, so I have no idea what he could be doing. But I have False Maneuver, so that opens up possibilities there if I was open-minded about using False Maneuver in such a fashion. But nonetheless, we're trying to get in there, try and do some damage. We do have these revealed, but with my jamming combo, that the frigates should be able to survive, although I am going to admit I am wasting these jamming a little bit, because I wasted Augur Disruptor, that when really the same hand favor was much more potent. I could have used that for right now to jam them when they're trying to boost away. Just being able to chain that effectively would help a ton, especially with the Assault Run to try and prolong the existence of my frigates, because any bomber waves, any good Star Cannon shots he gets is going to murder them pretty quickly. And I need to try and preserve them as much as I can. Make them a bit of a pest, if nothing else. And I'm also mismanaging my control, because I do have these, I do have all these groups, or all these ships in two separate squads, so I'm trying to move them in one entire fleet, which is probably a bit of a mistake because it puts them in a really wide arc. But I do have him running from me there. He is forcing himself to stop to try and fight me there, which is kind of working in my favor, because now he's basically taking double damage with that hollow field gun. I just got to be very good about prioritizing my Star Cannons a little bit. And even with those Pulsars, they probably do make up for the two Star Cannons they're losing, or they're replacing, but they're heavily negated with the hollow field up. This is not... They're heavily negated, but this is probably not the best engagement. It's a bit of a mess, I'm not going to lie. He just stood there, expiring all his holofields as I'm trying to figure out how to keep my holofield charge up is what's going on here. I'm trying to keep my holofield charge up while engaging him, and that's kind of where I think Fall's maneuver could be useful, especially since he doesn't have it as well. Because to think of it, he spent all that time turning around. If I boost right by him and then Fall's maneuver, once I have a safe distance, I keep my charge, and he's not actually hitting my ships there because I'm behind him. There is potential in that regard, but it is a bit of a fast mess, and I commit to trying to destroy that second eclipse to try and get rid of his big ships, his potentially favored ships. Again, I was not paying attention what was favored in that matchup, but I did destroy his 2 eclipses at least, if nothing else. So it gets rid of his big fleets, but with all my shadows gone, I am in a bit of an awkward spot. But for some weird reason, what happens here is he actually concedes the match, mainly because his PC crashed. Or not PC, but his Battlefleet Gothic ended up crashing off. So I'm going to get that concede message in a moment. And while I wasn't intending to have a rematch with him afterwards, I kind of gave myself a 20-minute, 30-minute break before queuing up for ranked again. We're going to have ourselves a bit of a rematch here. Alright, it's time for the rematch with Calimar there. And while, come to think of it, after looking at that replay, and the fact that he has Solarises and still some shadows available, I probably potentially would have lost that last match there in the cruiser clash, because again, I have all these pulsars, I have all these torpedoes, so the design of my fleet is coming back to bite me a little bit there, so ultimately I have to rely on my frigates and Arcanites to do that. But I feel like the Arcanites are really good at what they do there. They have all star cans. They basically rival my Kurnos patterns in terms of their star can potential, if not more so, when I have like 3 of them fielded together for basically the same points. So I have a lot of star cans available to me. It's just a matter of how to get the most out of them, quite frankly. And if at all possible, try and have my Kurnos, my shadows, actually be able to warp out so I can preserve them. That's going to be the big trick, which is going to be really awkward, because if I try and warp out, it gets rid of my hollow field. So I'm just straight up easier to kill, and with him able to lightning strike in a moment's notice due to lack of shields, that is probably not likely to happen. I'm going to have to really think on how to preserve these ships, because that's also going to be a priority, isn't it? If we're going to be playing a best-of-3 match. But I get first choice here, and I try with the Planetary Assault yet again, mainly because, of course, it is a 600-point battle. It's a little more lean for my cruisers, although I could have theoretically gotten away with a 700-point battle, because I'm only still fielding 2 cruisers. I don't plan on throwing in additional cruisers, because, again, the Auroras are not going to contribute very well. Interestingly enough, their only weapon for this type of matchup would probably be the Maelstroms, and if I were to field him for the Maelstroms alone, considering he has Solarises potentially, well, at the very least we know he has Maelstroms on at least some of his cruisers or his fleet, I'm just fighting an uphill battle at that point, so I can't really rely on that. I can't rely on that at all. So we're going with the star can strategy. I do have a lot of jamming potential. I just got to be good about utilizing them as I group up my beacons, get the stasis bombs ready, and I try and play a little more slower, a little more defensively. But what I ultimately try and do is commit to the same strategy I did before. Try and press him aggressively there. Try and give him no breathing room, which ultimately is probably a mistake, because again, I'm the defender here. I have these beacons that can help support me there, and with their 12,000 U range, they actually could do that relatively well. It's just, I need to be careful about burning my cooldowns, especially my Sam Hand favor, because it is a 3-minute cooldown, so if I burn that when I don't plan on committing, that's going to hurt me a lot. That's going to hurt me a lot, especially when I have to try and sort of the same hand favor early on, or at least it feels like I have to. But in all honesty, I can wait until I'm just within that 7,000 range before jamming, because we know he has this one beacon. We know he has the one beacon, and I'm trying to prepare for that a little bit. I just don't know if he has 2 or 3 beacons. That's the big question. Because we did see a recon probe, or an auger probe, and we saw at least 1 recon probe before, I think. So we know he has that as I try and intercept these bombers. It's at least 1 bomber wave, maybe 2, hard to say when they're clumped up like that. But we protect the beacon. We protect the beacon, so if I can get that to commit to a fight, that'd be useful. And he burnt his first Maelstrom, so we know again he has Maelstrom available. As the jamming is underway, his 3 ships are jammed. This is of course his Eclipses and his Void Stalker, so he went really top heavy here. Really damn top heavy, but he is already on the run. And he's burning all his jamming and all that as well, which puts me in a weird predicament. Do I back off, especially if I'm burning a second Maelstrom now, or do I commit? This is where I'm a little bit indecisive on, because I already got him running from me, so if I can reveal him, then I'm doing free damage to him basically, even with his silent run. Even with his silent run, I just kind of wish I burnt that repair later on that Arcanite to get rid of those fire results, because that thing's just going to burn down. It's just going to burn down to death. And also, I kind of question his lock-on a little bit, because if I'm understanding Holofield's how I think it works, it's actually a 50% armor resistance, so I use the lock-on to kind of try and negate an accuracy penalty with the Holofield, but if I'm understanding it correctly, I think that's just an armor resistance, which means the lock-on's not as valuable as it could be outside the critical hits, so a brace for impact, Assault Ryan probably would be better with my jamming strategy and just being able to take his hits better, especially the stray Pulsar does hit me. So I do question it a lot. At the very least, I should have 1 or 2 ships there try and brace for impact, as I just barely hit that mine with the frigate. Just barely. I tried to dodge out of the way, and this is looking promising, doesn't it? This is looking really promising, because we have them boosting away from us. We're getting so much free damage, and this Eclipse is just nearly dead. Just almost completely dead. We got several critical hits, and now his Holofield's gone, but now it begs the question, how do I engage this fight? Because standing still seems like a death errand. Quite frankly, the stasis bomb's like my best friend there, because I'm standing still, but I keep my Holofield. I wonder if there's something I can do with a stasis bomb to kind of use as a cutesy little maneuver. A weird little maneuver as I try and boost out, expecting a Void Explosion, because we already have 1 Void Explosion that potentially ruined my frigates there. And I tried boosting out to avoid a second one. And while this is not looking good for me there, this Void Stalker is almost dead. This Void Stalker could potentially be dead in a moment if I can get the hits I want. And with the 2 fire assaults on there, just barely getting hit by the bombers. We do even up the score some. We have an Eclipse with its Pulsars versus a Shadow. So I don't know how exactly I want to do this match. I just commit to a solid run there. I try and play a little more passive, potentially. And I kind of expect them to try and go for the objectives there, quite frankly. So I want to try and intercept them there. Especially since I have Sam Hand Favor available to kind of negate. Yeah, the Sam Hand Favor alone could do so much for basically fighting that Eclipse there. Especially if I could get it in range of the beacons that's contributing to damage. So ultimately, I'm not really sure how to do this, how to approach this, quite frankly. I'm expecting him to boost on over this way. He's probably still further behind me, so the stasis bomb is probably a little unnecessary. I just expect him to go aggressively for the objectives at this point. That's what I think anyway, because why wouldn't he? You would think he would have the potential, but with him revealing the Auger Disruptor, he's apparently behind me, which is kind of weird. It's kind of already odd he chased after the Shadow as aggressively as he did. And unfortunately, if I had kept running away there and wait for his solid run to go off, this probably could have gone a lot better for me, because he detected me at the same time as I detected him. That had so much potential if I knew what his strategy was. Although I did see the Auger Disruptor, I should have just kept on flying away, wait till the solid run burnt down, and then intercept him when I had a good bead to know where he is, because his silent run is not really useful if I already know where he's at. I just would have to detect him and keep him in vision range at that point. So we destroyed the Void Stalker, we destroyed an Eclipse, and that had some real potential to be a win for me if I could got the Sam hand favor off to kind of deny him the bombers and the star cannons and potentially the pulsar hits as well, because that would have made it difficult for him to hit me as well if he didn't identify me. Hard to really say. It looked promising because I had bombers as well. I had defensive fighters I could have used if I was worried about his bombers killing me. And hell, I think he was even heavily damaged there by the end of that match, so I could have still won that. It's just a lack of experience, quite frankly, in this weird mirror match. Because even with my experience playing Eldar in persistent mode, that's still a best of one, quite frankly. It's only a best of one match in the persistent mode, so I have to deal with attrition as a result, so I have to commit with kind of like more frigates, my third Colonel's pattern, possibly the Void Stalker, because everything else is not really going to be effective for this matchup. Which goes back to what I said before about preserving my shadows, because I could have just warped that shadow out. In all honesty, I could have just warped that out, and then I could have just done the same fleet composition as I did before there. Only this time he would not have a Colonel, he would not have an Eclipse, he would not have the Void Stalker, so he only have ships that have the same health as mine, a bunch of Solarises with 400 health, and I don't need to tell you how easily those things can die if I can get all my ships to focus fire on them. And a bunch of shadows which has the same health as me. I was kind of fighting a little bit of a uphill battle there because he had the extra health to kind of serve as a buffer, which probably justified why he could just stand there and take me head on a little bit with his hull field, because with the hull field gone, he essentially has the same durability as my shadows, quite frankly. Almost, anyway. It's really hard to say, and the one thing I did not realize here until after I deployed is I was thinking of going with all cruisers here, but when I saw it, I took the Eclipse back to go with the Void Stalker and the Shadow. I accidentally got rid of the Shadow, and now I'm stuck with an Eclipse, which, quite frankly, is almost useless in this matchup. Almost. If I can hit the torpedoes, then maybe it's alright, and it still has a decent number of star cans. And the pulsars actually make up for the 2 additional star cans that at least this Shadow has, but it's not nearly as potent as a pulsar normally is, so I shouldn't expect a lot out of it, especially since I don't have any more jamming abilities now, which is going to play a bit of a big part here, considering we've seen him having Auger Disruptors. Not so much the same hand favors, but he does have Auger Disruptors. So I'm going to point out right now this may be a bit of a mismatch just because of the accidental play I did. Just a little bit. Because while the Void Stalker can take the hits really damn well, if he jams me effectively and I don't have a ship that's able to detect for me, especially since none of my ships have extended sensors because I didn't even put any upgrades on the Arcanites, I am in a lot of trouble there as far as trying to detect them with the presence of the Auger Disruptor. So, it does make me wonder how can I change my fleet to prepare for an Eldar mirror match without compromising the rest of my fleet. Because I have Hellborn to kind of serve as a spotter when I want to go with the Eclipses and the Shadows like I have been, as I try and get some damage on this beacon, and I'm just barely out of range, unfortunately. I tried to see if I could get that kill with the beacon, try and give me a little more open space for moving around. But in the end, that was a failed attempt. A horribly failed attempt, and thankfully it didn't punish me that much because my pulsars are back up. They have relatively quick cooldown. As I saw run the Arcanite there, and there's the jam I was talking about. Just as soon as I boost on in, he jams me, but thankfully, I do have a few other ships that can detect for me, but with 5,000 range, it is a bit awkward still. It is still awkward as this Void Stalker is taking a hammering. Hell, apparently I had to get right next to it for me to detect it, but even then, those pulsars are doing work just because he decides to forsake his hollow field, so I could have potentially just killed that battle crew. Well, it was actually a cruiser immediately if my Eclipse had contributed with his pulsar. So that's another weird thing. I should not honestly expect any Eldar mirror matches for them to stand there and lose their hull field, because I can punish that so heavily with the pulsars, but I shouldn't seriously strategize around them not moving right. That feels like that could backfire so easily, but in this case, in retrospect, with what I'm seeing this match, I could have punished that so damn heavily, even with his hull field at half charge, because like right now, that's like a 40% resistance with the pulsars as opposed to the 80. As the Arcanites get the one cruiser up there, my Void Stalker unfortunately is gone, but it actually did a good amount, surprising amount of damage as we saw, with it firing blind into a shadow of all things. So there's a lot of things to consider with this matchup, and with how this match is playing out, it feels like it's going to be the hardest for me to figure out. Maybe not the most difficult matchup for me, because I do have those shadows, and my Void Stalker can do amazing work, at least in retrospect with how Calimar is just forsaking his hull field sometimes when he attacks me. I can do so much damage there in burst potential while still having the Star Cannons and Bombers to really hound him and harass him effectively. And then the Pulsars are like that wild card, that ace in the hole I have for when he does not have the hull field charge. So I do have a good selection of ships available to me for 2 matches at least. It's just a matter of how to get the most out of Arcanites and how to get the most out of my jamming potential, because we saw it in the very first match, potentially 2 shadows with 4 sensor jamming abilities, with how, well, what is it, 2 eclipses and a Void Stalker, that could just been game breaking just by itself. If I wasn't right next to his ships to get detected, I could have just bide my time and destroyed all 3 of his ships potentially. And that would have set me up so well for match 2 and 3 if I got that win on that assassination. It feels like anyway. But as it stands now, I am in no condition to fight 2 Solarises and a Shadow with a single eclipse there. Unless he wants to stand still for me again, because I could really instantly kill those Solarises with my pulsars, quite frankly. They just would take the same amount of hits as like a Tau or Space Marine, Vanguard or say, basically. Minus the shields. Minus the shields, they still will take a few hits, regardless of that. But in the end, I don't know what else to really say. This feels like it's been a bit of a mess there, because I was talking so much about what was going on and all that, but there was a lot of stuff going in the background, like when I was trying to chase him there, all the jamming potential going on. And with the Solid running, trying to preserve my my frigates there, because they are susceptible to bombers, but at the same time, if they can bait out a bunch of bombers and then Solid run, that puts me in such a good position for later on too. For all my other abilities that don't have to burn Solid run. But in the end, this is not looking promising for me. This is a loss, unfortunately. There's a lot to learn, mind you, but it seems like a bit of a mess, and it seems like with Calimar just standing there making himself such a tempting target, I can abuse that so easily. I just gotta figure out those nuances. And of course, try to figure out how to keep my holofield charge up, because when he does stand there, I don't really want to stop my ship so I can give him the shots he wants and so I can maximize my firepower. That seems like a foolish mistake too, a little bit. Hard to say. I know with the 2 shadows, all my cruisers basically have false maneuvers, so theoretically, I could boost past them and then just false maneuver behind him, then continue with free damage while standing still. And he would have no holofield for those shots too, so it's a bit of a mess of a match, but there's a lot to learn for me. And hopefully I could get that rematch soon with Eldar.